The old St. Miriam's orphanage stood forgotten in Ashfall County, swallowed by thick vines and shadowed by dark trees. Abandoned since the 1960s, its broken windows and crumbling walls whispered secrets of vanished children. The locals avoided it, fearful of the dark past tied to the building. Greg and Leela Turner, seeking a fresh start, moved in with their children, Ben and Sarah. They ignored warnings of curses and ghosts. But from the first night, strange things began. Sarah whispered about a pale boy watching her. Ben found eerie notes. Rule number 1, don't talk to the ones who stare. The house groaned, alive with unseen presence. Next morning, the house felt colder, as if the walls were breathing. Sarah refused to enter her room alone. She said the boy stood at the corner all night, unmoving, his eyes never blinking. Greg brushed it off as a nightmare, but Ben remained silent, clutching the strange note in his hand. Leela noticed muddy footprints in the hallway, smaller than any of theirs. Doors creaked open by themselves. Whispers echoed from the vents, soft. Childlike voices giggling and crying at the same time. The family tried to stay calm, blaming the wind, the wood, their nerves. But deep down, the house was already inside them. By the third night, Ben started talking in his sleep. Strange, broken sentences spilled from his mouth. Names the family didn't recognize, rules he'd never learned. Rule number 2, don't open the red door. Lila searched the house, but there was no red door. Until that evening, when Sarah pointed at a wall in the basement that hadn't been there before. Behind it, a faint outline of a door now pulsed faintly red, like it was breathing. Greg touched it and felt something move on the other side. That night, the power flickered, and Ben woke screaming with scratches down his back. Something was coming, and it already knew their names. ... The next day, Sarah stopped speaking entirely. She just stared at the walls, drawing strange symbols with her fingers in the dust. Greg tried to take her outside, but she screamed. He said not to leave. On the bathroom mirror, a new message appeared, written in condensation, though no one had showered. Rule number 3, never look under the beds. That night, Leela found Ben staring beneath his bed, silent and pale. When she pulled him back, his nose bled, and he whispered, "She's under there, crying." The air grew thick. The walls pulsed like skin, and from the attic came slow, dragging footsteps that no one dared follow. That night, thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the house. The red door in the basement, once sealed, stood slightly open. Greg, holding a flashlight, descended the stairs alone, despite Lila's protests. Behind the door, a narrow hallway appeared, lined with rotting children's toys and drawings on the walls, stick figures with hollow eyes. At the end, a small wooden chair rocked gently by itself. On the floor, Greg found a child's shoe, soaked in something dark and sticky. Then came the whisper, not from ahead, but from behind him. Rule number 4, never go alone. The door slammed shut. Upstairs, the children screamed. Greg never came back. They searched the basement, but the hallway and red door were gone, replaced by solid concrete. Sarah began whispering in her sleep, repeating Greg's last words, "Never go alone." That night, the walls thumped with soft knocking, first behind Sarah's bed, then from inside the bathroom mirror. Lila followed the sounds, only to find all the old orphanage drawings suddenly nailed to the hallway wall. Each child drawn with black eyes, bleeding mouths, and numbers above their heads. Ben pointed at one and cried, "That one moved." Lila turned back to the mirror and saw Greg's face screaming silently behind the glass. Lila dug into the town's archives and found the truth. The orphanage once held 23 children who vanished without a trace in 1961. Rumors spoke of a cruel headmaster who performed rituals in the basement, sealing spirits inside with rules to keep them calm. Every rule broken was a chain snapped. That night, all 4 rules had been broken. The house was no longer haunted, it was awake. Sarah began drawing symbols that matched those from the old case files. Ben wouldn't speak anymore, only hummed a lullaby none of them had taught him. And in the attic, the rocking chair never stopped moving. At exactly 3:07 a.m., all clocks stopped. On the living room wall, written in blood-like letters, was a new line. Rule number 5, don't answer when they call your name. Seconds later, Leela heard her name whispered from the dark hallway. She turned and saw Sarah standing motionless, eyes rolled back, repeating her name in a voice not her own. Ben stood beside her, pointing at the ceiling, where faint, childlike footsteps echoed overhead. The temperature dropped instantly. Phone rang, an old rotary one they'd never owned. Leela answered without thinking. The voice on the line said, "You broke them all. Now we remember." The next morning, the house was deathly silent. Lila found Ben and Sarah sitting motionless in the living room, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. On the floor lay an old, tattered book bound in leather, titled The Orphan's Rules. Inside, the pages were filled with cryptic warnings and drawings of shadowy figures. Suddenly, the pages flipped on their own, stopping at a final message. Break rule number 6, and you will never leave. Outside, the wind howled like a mournful scream, as if the house itself was alive and hungry. As night fell, the family gathered in the living room, desperate to leave. But the front door slammed shut and wouldn't budge. Windows darkened, showing only black voids outside. The whispers grew louder, circling like vultures. Sarah's eyes glowed faint red as she whispered, "We're part of the house now." Ben reached out, but his hand passed through a shadowy figure that melted into the wall. Lila screamed, realizing the orphanage's curse had trapped them forever. Souls bound by broken rules, doomed to haunt the place for eternity. Days passed, if time even moved in that place. The house no longer creaked or groaned, it breathed. Leela found herself writing rules without knowing why. Her fingers moved on their own, carving into the walls. Rule number 7, never speak their names after midnight. Sarah whispered, "She's making you one of them." Ben no longer blinked. His body was still, but his mouth repeated strange chants. Outside, the sky turned crimson, and inside, the walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting not the room, but a classroom, filled with ghostly children staring back. One of them looked exactly like Leela. That night, Lila stepped through one of the mirrors, drawn by her own reflection. On the other side, she stood inside the orphanage's old classroom. Desks were filled with ghostly children, their heads slowly turning to face her. At the chalkboard stood the headmaster, his face a stitched mask, his fingers long and sharp like needles. He didn't speak, just pointed at Lila's chest. She looked down. Her heart wasn't beating. Instead, the words, "Rule number 8, teach what you've learned," were carved across her skin. The children began chanting. Her body froze, mind unraveling. She realized she wasn't a visitor. She was the lesson. Back in the real world, no one remembered them. The family's names vanished from town records. Photographs faded. Their house listed as unoccupied since 1961. Friends claimed they'd moved long ago, but inside the orphanage, echoes of their laughter still rang, trapped in loops, forced to relive final moments. Lila wandered the classroom endlessly, now dressed in an old orphan's uniform. She could no longer speak. Her voice belonged to the house. Each time a new family visited, she watched silently from the mirror, hoping they wouldn't break the rules. But they always did, and so the house grew louder. The house now stood still, buried beneath decades of silence. But inside, It pulsed with memory. Children's giggles echoed down empty hallways, followed by sudden screams. In the attic, the rocking chair moved with no wind. In the basement, the red door sometimes reappeared, only for those who didn't believe in ghosts. Lila stood behind the glass of every mirror, her hand pressed silently, eyes pleading. The rules were still scratched into the walls, waiting for someone to read and break them. The house didn't hunt, it waited. Because curiosity was always enough. And the next visitor had just knocked. Thunder cracked like a warning from above as the house groaned, each plank shivering like it knew what was coming. Mirrors trembled violently, showing not reflections, but memories no one should see. Lila screaming, Sarah bleeding, Ben disappearing into walls. The red basement door, sealed for decades, slowly creaked open on its own, revealing a corridor of endless mirrors, each more twisted than the last. From upstairs, Sarah's voice echoed, layered and broken. They've returned. At the entrance, the door swung wide open. Rain fell hard. A child stood there, soaked, face hidden under dripping black hair. It lifted a hand and pointed forward. Then the lights went out. What happened next is a nightmare only the house remembers. But this was only the beginning.